Hi, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. My name is Isabel Ross, and I'm the coach at Peak Endurance Coaching. Episode 89 is an interview with Matt Whitaker, winner of the 2021 Two Bays Trail Run 56 kilometre in the men's category. Matt won the race in a stellar time of 4 hours and 7 minutes. Matt actually also won last year on a technicality when first place was DQed. This year he won on his own merits and comes onto the podcast today to share his experiences. Running is a tough sport and we runners are a tough bunch. However, this sometimes leads us to training through niggles and pains when we would be so much better off just getting them looked at and sorted. If you are tired of niggles and aches and pains ruining your enjoyment of running, come in and see the specialists at Health and High Performance. They will utilise the latest in technology and experience to help you get back to your running best. So head to healthhp.com.au/run and book an appointment so that you can ensure that you can run strong and free. You can also find them on Instagram, Health High Performance, where they post heaps of helpful videos. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I really appreciate the people who take the time out of their day to get onto Apple Podcasts to rate, review, and subscribe. Jim Nancho, I hope I said that correctly, gave 5 stars and says, really enjoyed the running chat with Andrew. Hopefully you were able to get more of these types of interviews in 2021. Thanks so much for that feedback. I hadn't actually thought of doing another one of these sorts of interviews. Let me know if anyone else is interested in this, as I'll definitely do more if people would like to hear that. And obviously it would make it interesting too, because now I do YouTube and you'll be able to see them on YouTube. So please do let me know, either through the social media or email. If you enjoy this episode, please do go on over and rate and review at Apple Podcasts. I have been aiming for 100 reviews by Easter this year, but I really don't think I'm going to make it the way things are going. Should I have a plan B? Let me know what you think. At Peak Endurance Coaching, I coach you to run any distance on any surface, be it road, track or trail, from beginners to advanced athletes, for everybody. So if you are interested, email me, isabel@peakendurancecoaching.com.au, so that I can help you with a structured, individualised plan that takes into account your life and your running needs. Enjoy the interview with Matt. Hi, Matt, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries. Now, just before we get started about talking about your win at Two Bays, can you tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your athletic background, and how you got into running?
Yeah, so I grew up in Sydney actually, and got into running through, I guess, high school athletics and did the 1500 and 3K. And then I guess after, I wasn't great at those distances, but then after high school, I kind of just kept running a bit more, and then did a marathon, and then did another one. And yeah, I tried my hand at triathlons for a bit and did an Ironman, and didn't love the cycling or swimming.
Jeez, so how'd you go in the Ironman?
Good. I'm really glad I did it, and I really enjoyed the training. Yeah. I think I finished in time? 10 hours 20 something.
That's a good time. Yep. Sorry. Anyway, go on.
No, but my strongest leg by far was the run. So I sort of, after that, I'm really glad I did it, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't think I'd do another one of those. I kind of just want to stick to running after that.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then I moved down to I moved down to Melbourne mid 2019 and started doing some trail runs there, and then sort of started loving trail running a bit more.
So you were more a marathoner to start with, and when you say you ran some trails here, did you join a trail running group, or how did that happen?
My old housemate is a guy called Gerard, who is a big trail runner, and he's done a 100-mile race, and he just did the Coast to Kosciuszko race last September, and so he's pretty inspiring as anyone who does those 100-mile, 200-kilometer races are. And I think sort of chatting to him, that's sort of what really piqued my interest in it. And I think it was just a nice change from road running, which was something I sort of focused on for the previous few years. And I'm quite conscious that if you do one thing and make it your sole focus for too long, you burn out of it. And then you wind up doing nothing at all. Whereas coming down to Melbourne and sort of having Listerfield Park or Cape Shank or Yu Yangs or even down on the surf coast so close. That's kind of, it was nice to try something slightly different.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I started with marathons, and I agree. You run the road for a while and you need the trails, you run the trails and then you need the road. So it's good to swap around.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was, everyone's going to want to know, what was your marathon PB?
I did 2:27
Ooh,
in Melbourne in 2019,
nice.
which was sort of, I'd had sub 2:30 as a goal for a few years, and
Yeah,
I hit that in 2019. And I guess that's sort of when I sort of thought, well, what do I do now?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
I guess is also the other thing that sort of pushed the trails on me.
yeah. No, that's completely fair enough. So as we said, you just ran and won the Two Barrels Trail Run in a time of 4 hours and 7 minutes, a good 19 minutes ahead of second place. So congratulations on this achievement. Can you tell us a bit about how the race panned out for you? Like, firstly, what was your strategy going in? Were you actually aiming to win?
I was aiming to win, and I sort of had a look at the entrances, and I knew there were quite a few decent runners, or really good runners running as well. The plan initially was to stay with whoever was leading and try and do that at least through halfway, and then sort of see how I feel. And someone else actually started, and I saw a few race reports in the Facebook group mentioned this. Someone else started off 4-minute Ks for the first 4 or 5 Ks, and I think we went through the 4-minute K. I think we went through the 4K mark in under 16
Oh
minutes.
my God.
And so I sort of went, oh, okay, we'll give this a go. And I stuck with him. And I think I was the only one that did. And then he slowed down a bit. And I found myself by myself. So I sort of just went, okay, let's go and see what happens.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
did that feel, that fast pace, did that feel under control?
It did. It was before you sort of get to that first small hill, and I think that's sort of when I started to pull away. I was a little bit nervous about if we kept that pace going for another couple of Ks.
No doubt.
So I was kind of, I guess, glad to find myself by myself when I did. It also, last year, I remember the race started off really quickly as well, and there are a few people that set off pretty quickly. And I knew that last year I was able to sustain that for the first half. So this year I thought, well, at least see if I can do it for the first half and then go from there.
Excellent. That's it obviously worked. And so what do you think your strengths are in that 2 bays course? Because it is quite a fast running course and it is good for people from a road background. Do you think that's what makes you good at it, or are you good at technical as well?
No, I'm horrible at technical. I was more noticeable in 2019 than 2020, but I kept losing ground in 2019 to the people I was with on the downhills because I was quite nervous. And there's a couple of really steep downhills that I struggled with. I think I just really like the sort of the middle section between the top of Albert's Seat and I guess the car park that's about 5Ks to go. It's just these really nice rolling wide trails that you can really get into a rhythm, and it's on grass and it's on sand, but it almost feels like the road. I think that's what I really like about the course.
No, I agree. And so what did you do for nutrition?
I had a whole bunch of energy gels in my pockets, and then some sports energy powder in my bottle, and my plan was energy gel every 25 minutes, which went through for about the first 2.5 hours. And then, as happens a lot, I started I guess breaking up the race by saying, okay, now I'll have another one in 20 minutes. And I think my last 2 gels were only about 15 minutes apart, which probably is, or definitely isn't necessary, but it helps, I think, break up the last few Ks for me when you're sort of still feeling, I'm feeling awful, but I've still got 20-30 minutes to go.
And I mean, I actually agree with that strategy, because when you're running that fast, you're burning through your carbs, so you really need it. So, and clearly it worked, and no gastric distress, I'm presuming.
No, everything was fine on that front.
Yeah. So basically you were leading for pretty much the whole race, is what you're saying?
From about 4.5 Ks, yeah.
So I know I've been in, like, many years ago in that position, and I find when you're leading, that feeling of being chased and you never know when someone's coming. How do you cope with that feeling?
I was more. I guess in the first half I wasn't too fast, and at points I was always hoping that someone would catch me if it meant that that person was going quicker and I hadn't slowed down, because then it sort of meant I'd have a gauge of how I was going in the race. And then in the back half I was a little bit nervous when at the turnaround point, I think second place then was Trav, and I saw him only a minute or so after I turned around.
Oh wow!
But I kept going, and I had the approach that I thought I was still running quite well, and I thought my pace was still okay. So if someone catches me, then good on them. They're running a really good race, and they deserve to. And then the other thing that I was mindful of was when you come into the aid stations and the amazing volunteers ring the bell, and I was keeping half an ear out for other bells after I left to see if I could hear any behind me as well.
Yeah, that's handy, that bell then, isn't it? So you basically, you felt under control and not under pressure.
No, and then I mean, obviously the last 15 Ks are always going to be tough, and I think anyone, for sure, if you don't find them tough, then
you haven't tried
you're
hard
a superhero. But so I sort of I had a rough idea of where the hills were and where the downhills were, and was just trying to maintain the same pace. And then I think the last 3 Ks, the wheels sort of started to fall off a little bit. And those stairs that you have to climb at about 2.5 Ks to go really did me in. So I was kind of, at that point, I was really happy that I wasn't running with anyone else, because I don't think I would have been able to give it a kick if someone had been with me.
Yeah. Fair enough. Now, what was your training like for this race? What do you do on an average week, and what did your mileage peak out at?
So I did the Surf Coast Century race in the first week of December, which is my first 100K race. And in training for that, I peaked at, I think, a few 100-mile weeks in a row. And then it was sort of when we were coming out of lockdown. So my long runs, I'd have to be a little bit creative with running laps around the tan and things like that. And then I did that. And I was relieved that I finished that, and sort of said to myself that 2 bays is in 7 weeks. If I can take 1 week to recover and then put in, I think I said 3 or 4 decent weeks of training and then a couple of weeks of tapering, then I'll do it. And I was sort of on track. And I think, so my mileage was a little bit lower for 2 bays because I was a little bit conscious of burning out after the 100K, and also because it was Christmas and I don't know, I've never, and so I think I was running about 120, 130 Ks a week for sort of that peak period for this one.
Wow, that's a quick turnaround, 7 weeks between your first 100K. That's amazing. You must have very good recovery skills.
Yeah, I mean, recovery was always the priority for that first week or two. And then I was sort of starting to feel better. And then I came back to Melbourne, where it's a lot less humid than it was in Sydney, where I was. But I don't know, some people, like I know someone who also did the 100K who then ran 50 Ks on New Year's Eve. And, he did the Wilson's Prom 100 the week after, and then ran 50 Ks on New Year's Eve, and then did 2 bays. And now he's doing this backyard ultra in a couple of weeks. So I know that, I think, I guess it just depends who you are, as to how quickly you can recover.
Yep. And so, as part of your training, do you do a couple of speed sessions a week and long runs? Talk us through that a bit.
It's always one long run a week, and then I guess for the rest of the week, I don't really have a set training program. I'm more on the Monday, I know how far I want to run, roughly what sort of elevation gain I want to do, and how far I want my long run to be. And I guess the rest of my runs, I sort of set out in the morning and see how I'm feeling, and that sort of determines the pace I run, or I guess how far I run. And so I haven't. I'm probably not the poster boy for good training habits, because I haven't done any speed work at all since I think my last speed run was a park run before the park runs got axed before the before the lockdown. So it's not overly structured in that way.
So I assume you did speed work for your marathons though?
Yeah, that was a little bit more structured. I'd have a couple of sessions a week where I'd try to do X by X kilometers at marathon pace, and then X by X kilometers at half marathon pace, and then also put my long run in there, and then the rest of the runs would be a little bit easier.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you don't do specific speed work, but I'm presuming that when you run, and you say you run by feel, that on the days that you feel good, you push harder, and then you will have an easier day when you just cruise. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the other thing that I've also gotten more conscious of in the last couple of years is that even if you're feeling good 3 days in a row, don't push the pace 3 days in a row, because then you won't feel good on the fourth day, and then you'll injure yourself, and then something will happen. So I'm starting to, I guess, force myself to think about it a lot more than I probably used to.
Yeah. And that's good. And it's very true, because it's easy to feel good and just keep pushing it, and you're right. And then you just dig yourself into a hole. Now, do you have a high point from the race you can share with us, and possibly a low point? I mean, you might not have a low point, and that's awesome.
I guess in terms of a high point, it was just, I mean, as well as the breaking up the race by taking the gels, the way that I really break it up is by knowing how far between the aid stations, and sort of knowing that you're X kilometers away from these amazing volunteers who are just super supportive and have taken this time out, and I guess for no personal benefit of their own, but to help these runners run this course. And it's just kind of going through those areas is such a boost.
Yeah.
And I guess in the same vein, probably the stretch that I enjoyed running the most, and I'm shocking with location names, but I think it's about 15, 20 Ks in, on a slight downhill on a road where you're running in the opposite direction to some of the 28K runners. And you've got your name on your bib, and they've got their name on their bibs, and you're calling out to each other and sort of pushing each other on. And there were no high fives this year for obvious reasons, but I'd actually, thinking about it, that's probably my favorite stretch of the course.
I do love that about Two Bays, is the how everyone cheers everyone on. I think it really makes the race so special.
Yeah. And I sort of, I felt a bit uncomfortable calling people by their names without having ever met them before. But then you sort of realize that everyone's doing it. It's part of it. So you kind of you've got to embrace that part of it, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'm always part of the sweeps group, and so we do that too. And some people freak out when they're like, "How do you know my name?" But yeah, they forget it's on their bib, don't they?
And then you see someone, I think someone had on his bib McLovin or something like that.
And what do you call that?
And then you're laughing, and then exactly. Yeah.
I do remember when you came through, because we were all amazed at the huge lead that you had. So it was noticeable early on. And so do you have a low point at all? And was it possibly the stairs?
The stairs at the end weren't, I mean, they wrecked me, but I sort of knew that I've just got to trudge to the end, and there's only 10, 15 minutes to go. I think for some reason I struggled with the Arthur's Seat climb a lot more this year than I did last year. And I think it's because this year I actually knew exactly how far it was to the top, because I knew the length of the climb. But this year I was alone and wasn't chasing someone else. And it feels at times never ending. And then you get to the top, and there's those rolling hills before you get the downhill, which I'd forgotten about coming the other way. So that was probably the most demoralizing part of the course.
It's a tough climb, that is for sure. What was it like? Because many of us will not get this opportunity to experience it. So talk us through what is it like crossing the finish line in first place?
Um, I guess it's just I, it's just fun,
Yeah.
and you sort of, I don't know, it's fun, and you've got people sort of cheering and clapping, and it's just there's such a good vibe at the finish line. But I sort of feel like that applies whether you finish first or
Oh yeah.
wherever, that and especially at a race like Two Bays, where the cheering that you're getting regardless of where you finished is the same. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, it sort of gives you a real boost for those last couple of 100 meters. And it's sort of there's another thing that I'm learning more and more is don't just breeze through that because you want to get to the end. Actually mentally enjoy it and mentally
Yep.
savor it, and make sure that when you actually finish, you can actually remember what the last couple of 100 meters were like.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah. Because it's so fleeting. It goes so quick, really, in
Yeah.
the scheme of things.
And I remember a few races that I did a few years ago, and I'd have this goal, and it was more for the road marathons, but you'd build it up in your head and you'd train for it, and then you'd be really nervous about it, and you'd run the race, and you'd finish, and you'd be emotional and relieved. But then you sort of think back on it and realize, I actually don't remember what happened in that last kilometer at all, because you're just so relieved and
Yeah.
emotional. So I'm sort of learning to be more present, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think
in that
that's
last
awesome.
stretch.
Yeah, more conscious of what's going on and savoring it, like you said, because you have worked so hard and that's the moment you're working for. So it makes sense.
Exactly.
Now, how did it compare to 2020? Because in 2020, that was a bit more of a, well, not controversial finish, but an unusual finish for you. You actually came through in second place, but you ended up winning it. Can you talk us through that one?
Yeah. So I think 2020, I was in third place and then
Okay.
overtook John Dutton with
Yep.
about a K and a half to go.
Yep.
And I was definitely running scared for that last
Yeah, I bet.
bit. But I was sort of, my mindset was, I'm in second. I want to stay in second.
Yeah.
So that was sort of what was motivating me. And then I crossed the finish line, and they had the tape, or the thing that the winners you run through. And I sort of thought, oh, they must do this for everyone, that everyone that finishes. And then I think it might have been Kate or who mentioned that first had been disqualified, and it was quite a weird feeling because I 100% understand that the rules are there for a reason, and in particular, rules around minimum water are there for participants' safety. But Dane, the guy who crossed the finish line first, was 5 minutes ahead of me. He could have been running with 2 liters of water, and I think the way that he ran that day, he still would have crossed the finish line first. So I was stoked to win it, but I guess I conscious that I didn't run the best race that day.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I mean, I'm sure it was an awesome run that you did, but I can understand that you would have that feeling. So, did you kind of come back this year thinking that you wanted to just win it on your own merits this time, and that was the purpose?
It was definitely in my mind that it would be nice to be the first across the finish line this year. So I guess that was the nice difference between this year and last year.
Yeah, yeah, I bet it was. And so speaking of recovery, how has your recovery been? Have you had some time off and straight back into it?
I ran the day after, but it was probably better described as a shuffle rather than a run. And I guess the main thing that I sort of noticed was that those first few days, the legs felt okay, but the energy levels were just shot. So you'd run for, I think, 5Ks and start to feel faint. So I was sort of finding that I was having to force myself to get to 10Ks or get to however far I was wanting to run, which probably wasn't smart thinking about it now. But the last few days, I've sort of started to feel a little bit better running again. So I think I'll take it easy for the next few weeks next couple of weeks and then sort of start gearing up again.
So do you think that possibly the reason why you found the recovery a little bit harder in the first few days back was because you still also had the 100K in your legs anyway?
I think that's right. And I sort of struggling in the last couple of Ks of the race this year, whereas last year I finished a little bit stronger. I think the difference there was the 100Ks as well. Was that it was glad the race was only 56Ks and not 60 or 65, because it would have been a trudge to the end of it this year. But I think that's right.
And how did you? I couldn't find I didn't find your time from last year. What was your time last year?
It was 4:06 and something. So I think it was about a minute faster than this year.
Yeah, but which is much of a muchness, to be honest.
Yeah, and I was actually I was on track to beat it this year until I got to those stairs, and that's when that's when I slowed down quite a bit.
Oh bugger! Oh well. So will you be going back next year?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm not sure whether I'll do the 56K or the 28K.
Oh, you should go for a 3K.
But I'll definitely be going back.
Yeah.
I just we'll see what happens. But either way, it's such a fun event. I think it'll start to become an annual thing for me.
Yeah, that's awesome news. So what's next for you? What are you training for now once you have fully recovered?
The Canberra Running Festival in the second weekend of April. I want to try and get as close to 3 hours as possible for the 50K.
Ah, nice.
Which is back on the road, and so sort of back to that, I guess, more structured training for a few weeks, which is the speed work and then the long runs and then the easier runs. But I was sort of thinking about it the other day, and having not done that for probably close to a year, well, over a year, probably closer to a year and a half, I'm actually kind of looking forward to doing that for a bit again.
Yeah, it's good to mix it up.
Yeah. So I'll put a couple of months into that.
So what would your longest run be for a 50K?
Good question. I probably need to
56Ks?
I think potentially I might try and do a marathon in training once, just because I sort of know that I can do that with the legs as long as I take it easy now and not still be feeling that 3 weeks later. But I think other than that, maybe 35, 40Ks will probably be the weekly long run.
And what was your longest run for the 100K?
I ran marathons 3 weekends in a row. So I did one, I think I did 11 and a bit laps of the Tan, which was when we still had the, I think it was a 20-kilometer radius then. And that was the biggest hill that I could think of that was close enough to me. And then I think I did the second weekend, I did 42Ks around the Yarra Bend to get some more hills in. And then the third weekend was when the radius lifted and I went out and ran most of the back half of the course. And then it was 3 weeks to the race and the tapering started. I just find it interesting what people do as their longest run for 100K because, to be honest, I don't think you need to, smash out a 60, 70K run. And so I was interested to know what your thoughts were on that one too. Yeah, I did a fair bit of looking at what other people have done that I know on Strava in the past when they've trained for 100K races and all that. All I learned from that was that there's, for 10 different people, there's 10 different ways to train for it.
Exactly. Yeah. So how did you cope with lockdown?
I mean, like everyone, it was a struggle, but for me, it was, I think my biggest sacrifice was the hour restriction on running, which in the grand scheme of things is hardly a sacrifice.
I know, but it was tough.
It's easy to say that in hindsight, in 2021. But it was in hindsight as well. It was kind of, it was a good chance to maybe take a little bit easier for 6 weeks, whereas otherwise I might have still just tried to push through and still tried to hit some high mileage weeks, even if I hadn't had a race that I was training for, just because there's nothing else to do. So I sort of think if, and then I don't know what would happen in the back half of the year if I'd burned out then. So it wasn't, for me, it wasn't too bad. And in hindsight, it was kind of a blessing. Well, at least that part of it, the hour restriction of running, was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we've always got to try to find the positive in every situation, and certainly ultras help to teach you that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So is there another 100K on the cards for you, or a miler perchance?
Definitely not a miler. I think that's I can pretty confidently say I will never attempt a 100-mile race.
Oh, you say that now. We'll see.
Yes, I think I also said at one point I'll never attempt a 100K race, but we'll put that to one side. Yeah. I'm sort of tempted to go and have another crack at the Surf Coast Century again.
What was your time
because
there?
I guess it was 8 hours, 59 minutes and 20 something seconds. Nice. But the back half of that race, I didn't run it how I wanted to. Yeah. And so there's sort of a little bit of wanting to redeem myself on parts of that course that I know I could have done better, I think.
Yeah, some unfinished business there.
Yeah.
So can I ask, at something like the 100K there, were you doing gels as well?
Yeah, so then it was gels every, I think, 35 minutes. And then I'd also have the 2 500ml bottles with the energy powder or the drink powder, which I was refilling quite a bit more. And my plan originally had also been to either have a Cliff Bar every hour and a half. But I think by 4 or 5 hours in, I was feeling so awful that solid food stopped being a thing that I could do. And then it was just back to the gels and the drink powder.
Yeah, that's very common. And you did well even to manage to stick with the gels, to be honest.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories, so I couldn't imagine how people must feel if you get to 80 Ks and then you can't even take more energy in. So I was at least relieved it hadn't gotten that bad.
Yeah, yep. So you've got the Canberra 50K coming up in April. How many times a year do you like to peak for big races?
I'm kind of, I guess for me, treading new ground with that, because it used to be 2. I'd do a race in April and then a race in October. And then I guess after I did the Melbourne Marathon in 2019, I stopped. I guess after I did 2 days last year, I started more just planning it around how I was feeling. So I'm not sure what will happen after Canberra or what how many races I'll do for the rest of the year, but I think I'll tend to play it by ear. So it could be 1 or it could be 5, I think.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. I mean, yeah, but like you say, generally marathoners tend to stick to two a year, and but ultra runners tend to do more. So hopefully you keep on top of that recovery. Do you have a specific nutrition? Like I know there's lots of people who say veganism helps them, or high protein. Do you just eat all the food?
Eat all the food. I'm not restrictive in any way. And there aren't many foods that I don't like. The one thing that I do really try to pay attention to is how much protein I'm eating.
Yeah, I think that's
so the goal is always at least 100. Yeah. So the goal is always at least 120 grams of protein, and then if it's 100 a day, and then if it's 120 grams of protein, but I've had a pizza or fish and chips or something that's probably not the healthiest, I'm not as fussed about that side of it.
Yes. Yep. No, and I think ensuring your protein levels helps enormously with recovery. So obviously that's helping you as well.
Yeah.
Now, how can people who are listening, where can they follow you on social media?
I'm on Instagram and Strava.
And Strava, yep.
What is it? I think my Instagram was Matt Whitzy, WHITZY, and then Strava's just Matt Whitaker.
Okay, all right. So people can look that up. I'll put the links in the show notes if you're happy with that. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your 2 days experience with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you.